Tijela 15 humanitarnih radnika pronađena u pijesku u južnoj Gazi. Autopsije su otkrile tragove egzekucija, uključujući vezane ruke i prostreljne rane. O izraelskoj ofanzivi na civilne infrastrukture razgovaram sa veteranom novinarom Walidom Batrawijem. Donald Trump je uveo carine na robu iz gotovo svih zemalja, uključujući i za jednog od svojih najvećih trgovinskih partnera, Kinu. Kina je odgovorila kontramjerama. Šta su to kontramjere? Razgovaram s novinarom CGTN-a Shenom Shiweijem. Šta je budućnost Škotske unutar Velike Britanije i nakon Brexita? Iz Glasgowa za PULS PLANETE govori Linda Fabiani, penzionisana škotska parlamentarka. Marta završena je složena sedmodnevna operacija spašavanja tokom koje su pronađena tijela 15 poginulih humanitarnih radnika, 8 članova palestinskog crvenog polumjeseca, 6 pripadnika palestinske civilne zaštite i jednog zaposlenika Ujedinjenih nacija. Njihove kolege pronašle su ih zakopane u području Tala Sultan u Rafahu na jugu Gaze. Prema dostupnim informacijama, prvi tim ubile su izraelske snage 23. marta, dok su ostali hitni humanitarni timovi napadani satima dok su tragali za nestalim kolegama. Njihova tijela su zakopana u pijesku, a zajedno s uništenim vozilima hitne pomoći, jasno označenim ambulantnim kolima, vatrogasnim kamionom i vozilom Ujedinjenih nacija. Autopsije su pokazale da su neki od ubijenih imali vezane ruke i prostreljne rane na glavi i prsima, što ukazuje na egzekucije. Ovo je najnoviji dokaz potencijalnih ratnih zločina u izraelskoj ofanzivi na Gazu, koja traje uprkos globalnim pozivima na primirje. Međunarodna zajednica još uvijek nije preduzela konkretne korake kako bi zaustavila nasilje. As Israeli forces escalate their offensive, the international community remains largely inactive, and Western media coverage continues to be called into questions for its bias. Let's start with this harrowing report. What does this tell us about the reality on the ground in Gaza? Joining me now from Toronto is Walid Batrawi, veteran journalist, to discuss the unfolding humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza and the shocking reports of executed Palestinian paramedics. Walid, thank you for being here. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, Walid, what is the reality on the ground in Gaza right now, and how does it compare to the way international media portrays it?
Well, I think it's a dire situation. It's a very dangerous situation. It's escalating minute by minute. I mean, it's even not compared to the pre-ceasefire situation. As the ceasefire broke on the 18th of March, the situation has escalated in a very different method, in a very different route. It's not only targeting civilians, but also targeting journalists, targeting humanitarian aid workers, targeting civil defense, targeting the Red Crescent. So it's a massive targeting and a massive destruction. Additionally, they are erasing whole territory. For example, they have asked Palestinians, residents of the Rafah south of the Gaza Strip, to evacuate again, and they have started erasing the whole city, which means that there's a non-stop war and genocide against the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip that is also coinciding with an ongoing military operation in the West Bank.
Yes, but what do you make of the Israeli government's justification for targeting ambulances, medical workers, journalists, claiming Hamas uses them for cover?
Well, I mean, these are allegations, as you have said, and accusations that have not been proven true so far. I mean, the Israelis can say a lot, can accuse everyone of being member of the Hamas organization or helping Hamas organization. But I have worked, for example, on investigating the targeting of Palestinian journalists, and we investigated actually some of those who Israel has accused of being members of Hamas or knowing about October 7 before it happened. And, ironically, one of them got the permission of the Israelis to leave the Gaza Strip. So how come you kind of accuse someone of being a member of Hamas, then granting him a permit to leave the Gaza Strip? So I mean, it's sometimes it's contradicting itself. Sometimes it does not really make sense. When you are talking about aid agencies, an international UNOPS, for example, or OCHA, that these are UN agencies, and some members of their team have been killed and targeted by the
No, that
Israelis.
says
So
many
there's
things.
no justification.
Yes, no justification, and there is a grave inactivity of international community when it comes to this. You and I worked together at International Press Institute on these matters, especially when it comes to journalists. So what do you think of the way Western media portrays the Israeli offensive on the civilian infrastructures, on journalists, medical staff, UN staff at this moment, Walid?
Well, to be honest, I mean, sometimes we're blaming the media, but at the same time, they do not have access to the Gaza Strip. They only rely on Israeli sources. And of course, international media has to look on both sides of the story. So they take the Israeli accusations and they put them in the story. But on the ground, they are not allowed. The Israelis are not allowing journalists to get into the Gaza Strip. And ironically, also, every Palestinian journalist is not being credible in the eyes of the international media. Some of those who have worked for ages for the international media are being questioned now because, because of not. I mean, it's just the international media is not abiding by international quality of standards and ethical journalism and editorial guidelines, but mostly, as we have talked before and before, they are trying to play safe and they're trying to be politically correct rather than editorially correct in many cases. Trying to balance between the victim and between the oppressor, trying always to tell the story from the Israeli perspective. They do not have access to the Gaza Strip, and this leaves audiences in the dark. However, I would say that the social media had played a great role, and this is why we have seen people in London, people in different, in Washington, people in New York, the encampment in all these universities that have taken place. It's not because of the mainstream media, but it's because of the social media.
Oh, absolutely. And we can even see what's going on in real time in Gaza via social media and what journalists on the ground are actually airing on social media. If it wasn't for social media in this particular conflict, then we would never know what's going on. I want to talk to you about a recent report about Palestinian paramedics being executed while their hands were tied. How significant is this incident, what they call it in the media, in the broader context of alleged Israeli war crimes in Gaza? And this is now what I want to talk about, the ICC as well, and of course, including the United Nations. How do you comment on this?
This is yet undoubtedly another evidence for crimes. I mean, we have always been, as journalists, trying not to judge because we are not the experts on war crimes, and we say that let the experts decide. But having, a crew, a team of medical workers with their hands tied and ambulances being targeted, although they had coordinated with the Israeli authorities to be in that area, and then trying to cover the evidence by burying the ambulances. This is something that, if it happened in another context, the whole world would have revolted against, and the whole world would have said something about it. And now, as you've described it, and as the international media is describing it, is an incident. No, it's not an incident. It's not an isolated incident. It's a policy of ethnic cleansing. It's a policy of genocide that is taking place in the Gaza Strip. And there's no doubt about it. There is no doubt that this is a war crime. I'm not an expert, but I cannot imagine, that this cannot be classified as a war crime.
Now, despite the overwhelming humanitarian crisis that we see on the ground, and the international community has largely failed to take meaningful and firm action. Why do you think global institutions, including the UN and the ICC itself, have been completely ineffective when it comes to Gaza and the civilians?
I think it's all about politics. It's all about the powers who are governing these institutions. Although we have seen that the International Court of Justice has taken decisions, but nothing has been implemented. I mean, the UN has called for an immediate ceasefire, but you know, Israel, with the support of the United States, does not abide by anything. When you have the United States backing you, when you have the U.S. President Trump hosting Benjamin Netanyahu and flattering him and glorifying him, and Benjamin Netanyahu sitting next to Trump with this big smile on his face and getting the support, this means that this is a green light to continue. And all the vetoes that we have seen by the United States and by other countries that are also trying to play political correctness towards Israel, and probably they fear the notion of anti-Semitism, for example, because everyone who speaks out then immediately he or she is labeled of being anti-Semite and so on. So it's I think that the biggest supporter for the Israeli government and the Israeli actions actually in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank is the United States. We have heard Donald Trump saying or requesting Palestinians to evacuate the Gaza Strip. And we have seen a horrific video of Trump enjoying the beaches of the Gaza Strip, just knocking down every humanitarian aspect of the Palestinians who are living in the Gaza Strip. Palestinians have been described by Israeli ministers and by Israeli officials as animals that have to be killed. And we have seen ministers saying that the whole Gaza Strip should be erased and replaced by Israeli towns and Israeli hotels and beaches and turning it into a touristic area. So and this is on the coast, and this is who is paying this big price? It's the Palestinian
Walid,
people.
it's the Palestinian people. Walid, we know that there are 18,000 children that have been killed by the IDF since October 7, 2023. And now, can you describe, I don't know if you have anyone in Gaza or West Bank, can you describe the daily life for the Palestinians, for the children, for the people there, and who are living through constant bombardment? Even the ceasefire was unilaterally broken by the Israel side.
Well, I mean, I've left the West Bank a year ago. And imagine a year ago, I used to wake up every morning not knowing how my day would go on, and not knowing if my daughter would be going to the school. And this is, I would say, in a relatively quiet and calm city, the city of Ramallah in the West Bank, where the Palestinian president sits, where it's less likely that the Israelis would go into. I had occasions, when the Israeli forces knocked the door of the building and they were looking for someone and they misidentified the building and so on. So imagine if they were trying to attack someone. Misidentifying a building is something that could have cost, our lives. So I'm talking about a year back. Imagine now, on a daily basis, in the West Bank, in the refugee camps of the West Bank, in Jenin, in Tulkarm, in all these refugee camps, it's horrible to just wake up and uh, being asked to evacuate, no one would imagine how one would feel when you're asked to just leave your house and not knowing whether you are going back to your house or not, let alone what's going on in Gaza. Even when you take refuge to a school, even if you have your own tent, even if you go to the hospital, these are still targets. We have seen pictures yesterday from a school in Jabalia that has been targeted, and you know, we heard the screaming of people, of Palestinian civilians, including children and women, screaming as their bodies are set to fire. And
Yes,
this is the
horrific.
daily life. This is the daily life. In addition to, not only this kind of threat that is coming from bombardment, but I mean, you know, starvation, no water, no hygiene, no schools,
Hypothermia, children dying of.
no, yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, nothing,
It's
nothing.
much more than the
It's totally
bombardment,
no
indeed.
house, no shelter.
Yes, indeed. How do you, Walid, respond to critics who say Palestinian journalists cannot be objective in reporting on war due to personal losses at the destruction of their homeland?
Well, I mean, it's the human nature. I mean, we are all humans. Uh, I mean, for me now, I'm talking as kind of, I would say an expert rather than a journalist on the ground. But when I used to be on the ground, I would talk about facts, about what is going on, and facts, especially at this time when you can see the genocide live on TV. You cannot really say anything. Pictures are telling every single of every single angle of the story. So this is what I say, to the critics, you know, and I would put the question: do you expect that Israeli journalists are not biased to the Israeli narrative? We have seen a presenter in a studio of a very prominent Israeli channel with a gun on her waist. What does that explain? What does that mean? When we see journalists glorifying the genocide that is taking place in Gaza. Also, I mean, why it has to be the Palestinians who have always to prove right, have always to be objective, have always to be on the right line and politically right and so on. But the Israelis and the international media, not being so.
And no one's questioning it. To be fair, no one's questioning it either. One last question for you, Walid. What is the most important thing that you think and you want people outside of Gaza to understand about what's happening, and what can they do to help, maybe to raise awareness or directly help those in need?
Well, first of all, everyone has to understand that this did not start on October 7th. This conflict has been going on a long way before, 70 years before. We have seen, I am 55 years old. I have not seen any, any peaceful day in my life, apart from probably being outside the country. So this conflict has been going on. I've covered this conflict since 1991. Even before that, I was like part of the community. I was a student and so on. So I could witness what was going on. So there's not a single day when Palestinians woke up not being worried about their well-being, about when would this occupation end. And occupation does not only mean this violent war. It's the daily life. It's the checkpoints that we had to cross every day. It's me, for example, being born in Jerusalem in 1969, and if I want to go to my birthplace, I must have the permission of the Israelis. Imagine, no one would imagine this in the world, that someone who has been born somewhere needs a permission from the authorities to enter his or her birthplace. So my message is, this did not start on October 7th, and my message is to the entire world is that just be humans, act as humans, and put pressure on your governments to respect the values that they have put values of human rights and freedom.
That is, I'll conclude with that. On that note, I will conclude this conversation. Walid, thank you very much for joining me for and speaking for Newsmax Balkans.
Thanks, Eka.
Thank you. This was Walid Batrawi, a veteran journalist. We discussed the unfolding catastrophe in Gaza. Moving on, PULS Planet, be with us. Donald Trump, predsjednik Sjedinjenih Američkih Država, uveo je recipročne carine na robu iz skoro svih zemalja na svijetu, a među njima nalazi se i Bosna i Hercegovina. Burne su reakcije zemalja svijeta, u prvom redu Njemačke. Reagirala je i Ursula von der Leyen, predsjednica Europske komisije.
Nešto više od 2 meseca prošlo je od stupanja Donalda Trumpa na sam vrh vlasti Sjedinjenih Američkih Država, a gotovo iz dana u dan ne prestaje da iznenađuje svojim političkim odlukama. Njegova najnovija strategija uvođenja drastičnih carina na robu iz brojnih zemalja izazvala je ozbiljne reakcije na globalnoj političkoj sceni. Čini se da se Trump ne boji da izazove trgovinske ratove, a posljedice njegovih poteza već sada osjećaju najbliži partneri Amerike.
Dakle, carine pružaju našoj zemlji zaštitu od onih koji bi nam mogli naneti ekonomsku štetu. A mnogi su želeli da nam nanesu ekonomsku štetu. Možda ne tako očigledno, ali su nanosili velike ekonomske štete. Ali još važnije, one će nam doneti rast. Ove carine će nam doneti rast kakav niste vidjeli pre i bit će to nešto veoma posebno.
Srbija je suočena sa carinom od 37%, Bosna i Hercegovina sa 35%, dok je Severna Makedonija pogođena sa carinom od 33%. Ove tarife deo su šireg paketa trgovinskih mera koje je predsjednik SAD-a najavio, a koje pogađaju mnoge zemlje širom sveta. Reakcije ne prestaju da stižu iz zemalja koje se nalaze na spisku carina. Predsjednica Evropske komisije Ursula von der Leyen kritikovala je nove carine od 20% na robu iz Evropske unije, upozoravajući da će imati strašne posljedice za ekonomiju i milione ljudi širom sveta.
Duboko žalim zbog ovog izbora. Hajde da budemo jasni u vezi sa ogromnim posljedicama. Globalna ekonomija će pretrpeti ogroman udar. Neizvesnost će eskalirati i podstaći dalji rast protekcionizma. Posljedice će biti teške za milione ljudi širom sveta. Također posebno za najranjivije zemlje, koje su sada podložne nekim od najviših američkih carina, suprotno onome što smo želeli da postignemo. Ove carine će također naneti štetu potrošačima širom sveta. Efekti će se osjetiti odmah. Milioni građana će se suočiti sa višim računima za osnovne namirnice.
Kina je najoštrije osudila najnovije američke carine od 34% na celokupnu kinesku robu, ocenjujući ih kao taktiku zastrašivanja. Peking je upozorio da ove mere ugrožavaju globalnu ekonomiju i međunarodne lance snabdevanja te najavio odlučne kontramere. Velika Britanija je pogođena carinama od 10% na svoju robu, a njen ministar trgovine Jonathan Reynolds izjavio je da su sve opcije na stolu, uključujući i potencijalne kontramere. Iako Kanada nije pogođena najtežim merama, carine od 25% na automobile koje sadrže delove proizvedene van Sjedinjenih Američkih Država izazvale su zabrinutost. Japan je izrazio duboko nezadovoljstvo carinama od 24%. Američki ministar finansija Scott Bessent apelovao je na trgovinske partnere da ne uzvraćaju kontramere na nove carine i upozorio da kontramere mogu dodatno pogoršati situaciju i dovesti do eskalacije trgovinskog rata. On je savjetovao sve zemlje da sačekaju, sagledaju situaciju i izbjegnu nepromišljene odluke. Sa druge strane, izostanak Rusije sa spiska predstavlja zanimljiv strateški potez, jer je trgovinska razmena između dve zemlje relativno mala u poređenju sa drugim globalnim partnerima. Moguće je da Trumpova administracija želi da izbegne dodatne ekonomske tenzije sa Moskvom, koja već ima teške sankcije na globalnoj sceni.
As tensions between the world's two largest economies escalate, Beijing has fired back with sweeping countermeasures, from hefty tariffs on American imports to exports control on critical rare earth materials. But how far is China willing to go in this trade war with the United States? Joining me now from Beijing is Shen Shiwei, journalist, political analyst with the Chinese CGTN, to break down China's swift, forceful response to the latest round of tariffs imposed by the U.S. under President Trump. And of course, join me from Beijing, Shen. Welcome to Newsmax Balkans. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me here.
It's really good to have you, Shen. So China has framed these countermeasures as necessary, safeguard national interest. How much of this move is really economically retaliation from China towards the United States?
Well, as we know, for today, April 4th, actually for April 4th, China has announced its countermeasures against the U.S. So-called reciprocal tariffs. Actually, now many countries now have aware that the compromise with the U.S. tariff punch doesn't yield good results. Actually, now more countries are now stand up to the U.S. bully in this regard, and also in terms of this kind of countermeasures like China and the European Union, they are all prepared to fight back. And also for Canada, they already fight back. So actually it's kind of a global reaction towards the US bully in this kind of regard. And in terms of the future, the potential negotiation, actually, it is also kind of a strategy that no deal would be made under this kind of extreme pressure, and both sides need to have an equal and mutual beneficial negotiation, and both sides need to create kind of a good atmosphere. So actually, as Chinese embassy to the US said earlier in March, like here we quote, if war is what the US wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any type of war, we are ready to fight to the end. So actually, on China's countermeasures, we have reiterated that China stands that there's no winner in the trade war or tariff war, and that protectionism has no way out. But China doesn't afraid of fighting back to safeguard its legitimate rights, and we will do that to the end, and we will protect the Chinese interest, the legitimate interest in facing the pressures.
Yes, and China has been very swift in the countermeasures. Okay, now with China filing a lawsuit at the World Trade Organization while also imposing its own tariffs and restrictions, does Beijing still see global trade institutions as a viable way to resolve these disputes, or is it a shift towards a more unilateral approach?
Actually, first, we should see China's official stance that China firmly supports the free trade system with the WTO, the World Trade Organization, and also China has firmly to support the operation. We know the WTO is not that perfect, but now facing this kind of unilateralism and also kind of this tariff conflicts, the US or some other countries didn't create a much better system. So if we don't have this kind of system under the WTO, we might have a worsened choice. So the WTO is right now is one of the best choice to address those kind of conflicts and also to have this issue. So that's why China has filed this lawsuits against the US, because the US reciprocal tariff has violated some fundamental principles within the WTO, and also some rules like how to treat each others with much preferential tariff policy. And the second point I want to emphasize that the WTO has warned that the U.S. new tariff, along with those introduced at the start of this year, could lead a contradiction of around 1% in global trade volume decrease. And so that's why we have seen a strong global reaction to the U.S. sweeping tariffs, which has already caused turmoils, especially in the markets. Just we can look at the plummet of American stock markets, especially after the global reaction and the countermeasures against the U.S. tariff conflicts. So the Dow Jones and also the Nasdaq just plummeted to a very new record. So all these reciprocal tariffs imposed by the U.S. is a kind of a serious violation of WTO rules, and a lot of experts just told me WTO is not that perfect. There's some politicians in the U.S. don't believe in the globalization, and or they want to just overthrow this kind of framework, but they cannot create a better solution. And so all this kind of tariff conflicts actually are jeopardizing some fundamental principles in today's trade and economic cooperation.
The U.S. has targeted Chinese industries critical to its technological advancement, while China is now restricting rare earth exports, potentially crippling the U.S. economy and supply chains. How far is China really willing to escalate this trade war, and what industries will feel the impact the most?
Okay, first, I just go through the statement from the Chinese Minister for Commerce that said, because China has already strengthened its the management and also the export control of the dual-use items, in which the rare earths, there are 7 items that related to some dual-use part. So that's why China is fulfilling its international obligations to strengthen the management. That is the readout from the Chinese Commerce Ministry. And in terms of China's intention, actually, as we said before, China doesn't want to have a trade war with the US because both sides are the top leading economy in the world. So if there is much more fight between the two largest economies, everyone will become a kind of a lose-to-lose situation. But China want to have a much more equal treatment with the US. So that's why all these moves are better to safeguard China's national interest while also fulfilling its international obligations. So all these issues are kind of to protect this kind of cooperation. And in terms of the supply chains, actually, the U.S. has targeted a lot of China's items. We can see not only for this kind of trade and economic cooperation, but also China's high-tech industries. Actually, the U.S. has imposed a lot of unilateral curbs because just in terms of its the great power rivalry and just to have their own interest. So all these issues have just let Beijing feels like the U.S. is still want to squeeze the development space. So actually, China will like to have more negotiations, but all negotiations should not be made under extreme pressure, especially when this kind of situation, the position is not in equal sides. So that's why China will have the willingness to negotiate, but all these issues shall be done by the equal stance, and China will fight back if the US want to escalate this trade war or conflict, because we see for the European Union, they are already prepared for the retaliation against the US, and also for Canada, they already imposed some tariffs also in return and to counter the US tariffs. So we can see it's kind of a global reaction, and China is part of the global reaction to safeguard the legitimate order of the international trade and economic cooperation.
Fantastic. Shen, thank you very much for this detailed analysis. Of course, all we can do is sit out and wait out to see what will happen in the upcoming period and time. Shen, thank you again for joining me.
Thank you for having me here.
This was Shen Shiwei from CGTN. Stay with us. We will be talking about Scotland, its possible independence and post-Brexit. Dok Škotska prolazi kroz složen politički i ekonomski pejzaž, momentum za nezavisnost i dalje izaziva oštru debatu. Prva ministrica Nicola Sturgeon suočava se sa financijskim skandalom, a pitanja o sposobnosti SMP-a da očuva povjerenje javnosti postaju sve učestalije. U međuvremenu lider laburista Ana Sarwar čvrsto se protivi nezavisnosti, što njegovu stranku postavlja kao moguću protutezu viziji Škotske za samoopredjeljenje. U ovom kontekstu škotska ekonomija suočava se sa značajnim izazovima od rastućih tarifa do post-Brexit trgovinskih barijera, zbog čega se postavlja pitanje da li je nezavisnost realan put naprijed. U tom okruženju događaj poput Tartan Day Parade u New Yorku nastoje istaći škotsku kulturu i poslovne mogućnosti, ali i prikazati potencijal za međunarodnu saradnju i ulaganja. Scottish First Minister is leading the Tartan Day Parade in New York, but he's facing significant challenges in the US relations. While President Donald Trump expresses affection for Scotland, trade tensions are rising, and First Minister knows he can't rely on friendship with Trump. History shows such relationships rarely last. I'm being joined by Linda Fabiani from Glasgow, from Broadcasting Scotland in Glasgow, to be more precise. Fabiani is former SNP MSP for East Kilbride and a former deputy presiding officer in the Scottish Parliament. She's an active campaigner in the SNP and for Scottish independence. Linda is joining me, just like I said, from Broadcasting Scotland in Glasgow. Linda, welcome to the program and thank you for joining.
It's a pleasure. Hello, Ika.
Hello, it's really good to have you here. We've met in Glasgow in 2021 for the first time. We have opened a discussion on Scottish independence and everything that surrounds it. COP26 climate summit was very good in Scotland, I must say. There's so much that we have to discuss tonight, Linda, so let's start with this. You have been campaigning for Scottish independence for quite some time. The second referendum has been blocked by Supreme Court in London. Now, my first question to you would be, do you think that Scots should have a second referendum, the second vote, and why?
Well, yes, I absolutely do. I believe that every nation, and Scotland is a very defined nation, that's not an argument. Any people should be able to have their say in their democratic future. And it's absolutely undemocratic of the UK government to be saying that they will not allow a second referendum. It's more than 10 years since we had the referendum in 2014. It was a fairly close vote. If you look at all the opinion polls now, support for independence is round about the 50% mark. So if half the people in Scotland are currently saying they would like to be an independent nation, be part of a normal country like most other people in the world, then I think it's absolutely awful that the UK government would say that they're not allowed to show their opinion via a referendum.
How do you comment the Supreme Court's explanation for this, for no second vote, as referendum should be granted once in generation, which was, like you said, 10 years ago, and it was declined for the second time, if I'm not mistaken, last year. How do you comment on that?
Well, what the Supreme Court are basically saying is that Scotland, with its elected parliament, does not have the right to decide that the people can have their say. What they've also more or less said in their judgment is that the UK Parliament is sovereign and that they're in charge, that they're the bosses. And if they say no, there's nothing that Scotland's democratically elected Parliament can do about it. And it's an absolutely ridiculous situation in the UK, which says that it's democratic.
But what does this say? What does this say about sovereignty of Scottish Parliament? If everything that you decide has to go back to London, what does it say about the sovereignty?
Well, it says that we don't have real democracy in Scotland, and that's only one of the things that has happened over the last few years. The Westminster government has gradually taken, more power back to itself. It has blocked some of Scotland's legislation. It is saying we don't even have the right to determine our own future by way of a referendum. And since we left the European Union, they have put legislation in place which actually states that Scotland doesn't have any rights because the UK can decide on Scotland's behalf.
Scottish population is quite divided on this question, whether Scotland should be independent state, independent country or not. What would you say from your perspective, from a perspective of SNP or someone who is campaigning for Scottish independence, what would you say to the other side who says, well, Scotland should remain in the UK and this is where Scotland's place is and it has been for hundreds of years? What would your best argument be for them?
Well, what I would say is that they should look at where Scotland stands today. They should look at the fact that Scotland voted overwhelmingly as a country, as a nation, as part of the referendum about EU membership. Scotland voted overwhelmingly to be a part of the European Union, to stay in the European Union. And that didn't matter. The UK took Scotland out of the European Union. So what I would say is surely Scotland as a nation and its people are entitled to take their own decisions. And we're not at the moment, that is very clear. I would also say, look where the UK is at the moment. Even after many years of Conservative Party rule, we now have Labour Party rule, which is not much different and is absolutely doing things which Scotland finds abhorrent, which is completely against what the Scottish Government, elected over many years, stands for. And that, again, we would be far better being able to stand on our own 2 feet and be able to take our own decisions and look at our own government to carry out the wishes of the people, which they can't at the moment.
Yes. How would you comment on Sarwar's government, leading the government right now? Like you said, Labour is pretty much like the Conservatives, like Tories. In what perspective, in what way are they not different from the Conservative government that led England and Great Britain just in the past mandate?
I think it's very sad, Ika. Because it was quite clear that Scotland, like the rest of the UK, wanted rid of the Conservative government. And when the Labour Party was campaigning in the Westminster election less than a year ago, they had a manifesto which promised many things. They said they were going to be different. They told people to vote for change. We had Sarwar's party in Scotland. They call themselves the Scottish Labour Party, but they're quite clearly not. They take their direction from Westminster. They went on platforms where they said they would protect, for example, women whose pensions had been taken from them. They said that there would be no austerity in Scotland. They said that there would be no cuts in the welfare budget. And less than a year in, we're facing cuts in the welfare budget. Some of the most vulnerable people in Scotland are seriously concerned about their futures. They let down the people that they campaigned with. And Scotland is very disillusioned, as is the rest of the UK. All the polling is showing that. So I'm afraid that the Labour Party in Scotland, which pretends to stand up for Scotland and what Scotland wants, is proving that they, like the Conservative Party, always bow down to the needs of the Westminster government, which is clearly biased towards the south and mainly the southeast of England, where the bulk of their population is. And I'm afraid playing to the worst possible prejudices of some people across the UK.
Linda, do you think Scotland has the economic feat to stand on when it comes to campaigning for or debating for independence? On that spectrum of debate, does Scotland have really the economic grounds to be an independent state? And which grounds are those exactly?
Well, I have absolutely no doubt that Scotland was a very viable independent country making all its own decisions. So when you look at Scotland, we're a small country, 5 million people, but we have huge resources. Not only oil and gas, but a wonderful future in renewables, with tide power, with wind power, with water power. We have a great record on inward investment. As part of the UK, we do really well in inward investment. Just how much better could we be if we could focus everything on Scotland? And again, we did not want to leave the European Union. Our relationships with other countries in the European Union are much stronger than for the rest of the UK. So I have absolutely no doubt that with our economics, we could do exceptionally well. We are a rich country. We are not allowed to reach our potential as part of the UK. And the UK come out with figures, for Scotland. But when you really look deep down into them, all they are doing is making estimates by the population size of Scotland as compared to the rest of the UK. There is no real analysis on these figures. Analysis has been done by those of us who feel that we are not given fair treatment, and they are there for people to see. A lot of work has been done in the last 10, 11 years, and I think the overriding factor here is we are not doing well as part of the UK. So why would anyone want to stay part of the UK, which is going down the way? As far as the rest of Europe is concerned, Scotland could be going up the way.
There have been very challenging times when it comes to economy, labor in the world. So given the current economic climate, how does the Scottish government plan to address the growing economic challenges, including, now we're talking about rising inflation, post-Brexit trade barriers, and potential fallout from President Trump's tariffs? Is Scottish independence, in your opinion now, a solution or a risk to stability of Scotland?
Well, what I would say first of all is that I'm not in government. I'm not even in Parliament anymore. So all I can give you is my opinion.
But as someone who has been and knows that side of the debate table, what would your answer be to this?
What I would say is that Scotland starts from an excellent position. As I said, we have resources that other countries would absolutely love to have. We have strong records in research and development. We have great educational establishments in our universities. We have a very, very well-educated population. Yes, we are going to find it hard, as every other country is finding it hard at the moment because of some of the actions being carried out by the US President. It will be difficult, but that's when people should be standing together. That's why we should still be working in conjunction with the European Union. And I want Scotland, as an independent nation, to rejoin the European Union. So I'm not saying for a minute that it will be easy. It's not easy for anyone the way the world is just now. But there's a very important point. A government should work on behalf of the people. And I know that the Scottish Government does. And the first priority of the Scottish Government is to do the best it can for the people of Scotland. We are against the cuts that are being made at Westminster. We are against the choices that are being made by the government at Westminster. An independent nation with control of its resources, control of its economy, their government can make decisions in the best interests of the people of their country. And I know that's what the Scottish Government will do. Difficult though it will be when we're hampered by having to go along with some of the Westminster issues.
I have to mention the financial scandal of Nicola Sturgeon. She faced a lot of criticism when it came to this scandal involving the SNP's handling of party funds. And we could have seen that the debate on independence and the momentum was lost for a second there because of that scandal. What has this scandal done to SNP's credibility as a party, as someone who could drive the Scottish independence debate? And can SNP recover from it?
What I would say to that is, first of all, because of Scottish law, I can't talk about the court case, which is imminent. What I would say on it is I think it was awful that it took 4 years to get to where we are just now. And if it is the case that the alleged embezzlement has been done, and if it is the case that we find out that that has happened, well, the Scottish National Party is the victim in this. So we have to wait and see what the outcome of the forthcoming court case will be.
How is SNP a victim in this when there are obvious claims that Sturgeon couple have used the funds, the party funds, in the ways that there shouldn't be used? To that,
there have been no charges laid against Nicola Sturgeon. They have been very upfront about that. The former chief executive of the party will be going to court for alleged embezzlement. I can't talk any more about that or give an opinion on that. But what I would say, for any organisation that suffers from embezzlement that is found to be the case, actually that organisation or company, which is the victim in that, if there has been that kind of behaviour. I mean, you asked me about the credibility of the party with that. It did damage my party, and I'd be silly to deny that, because people wondered what was going on, and it went on for so long. What I would say is that under our leadership with John Swinney, we are steadily regaining that credibility. We are steadily regaining the trust of the Scottish people by good government and by sincerity and doing what we believe to be best for the country. And I think that's very much recognised. And that's why the polling that has been carried out has consistently shown. That's why the SNP has been winning local authority council by-elections. So, yes, people trust the SNP.
So with Labour leader Anna Sarwar vocal about the need for Scotland to remain part of the UK, what do you think of his First Minister candidacy?
I think he's probably a very worried and very disappointed candidate for First Minister at the moment. When UK Labour won the general election for the UK last year, it was a good win. It was an excellent win. And I think at that point, Annas and his compadres believed that they would very quickly become the dominant party again in Scotland, and that come the Scottish Parliament election next year, they would slide into power. I think he has been very badly let down by his Westminster counterparts. I believe it's very obvious that it doesn't matter what he says. He just has to do as he's told. And we talked about credibility of political parties. The credibility of the Scottish Labour Party is at rock bottom because of the promises that were made that have come back to really hurt them because they've broken every single one of them.
Scotland's desire for independence has never been more vocal, maybe 10 years ago and now again. But with the current financial uncertainty and global instability, do you believe an independent Scotland would be economically viable? Or could it fall victim to the same problems as other small non-EU nations, such as even my country?
Well, Scotland is viable. As an independent nation, Scotland is viable. We have even heard many of those who have denied that in the past have been saying over the last few years, Scotland is a viable, independent, small country like many others. It's just that we don't want it to be. And that's a different argument from what they used to have. It's a recognition there that Scotland, like your own small country, like many other small countries across Europe, can stand on its own 2 feet and work with others for a better world. Now, yes, there's hard times just now. Of course there are hard times. right across the world for countries large and small, indeed for continents. I think some of what's likely to happen with America in the economic climate will be very difficult. But, at the moment, as part of the UK, Scotland is not doing well. And I don't see many of the other small independent countries across wider Europe who would say they want to go back in and join with others like in previous circumstances. I've never known an independent country say that it wants to change that. So Scotland has the right to have its referendum, for the facts to be laid out and for the people to have their say, so that Scotland can make the decision and join that family of nations, work with other nations for the good of the people who live here.
Let's talk about that cooperation. And I'm seeing that our time is running out as well. So last question for you, Linda. So the Tartan Day parade in New York, first of all, happy Tartan Day, congratulations, is absolutely an opportunity to showcase Scottish culture, but it also serves as a business platform. Scottish First Minister will lead the Tartan Day parade in New York, but he's facing also significant challenges in the U.S. relation, just like I said in the beginning. While President Donald Trump expresses affection for Scotland, trade tensions are rising. Can First Minister rely on friendship with Trump? History shows, like I said in the beginning, that these friendships don't really last long.
Well, my own view is that there's no one who can rely on Trump, on President Trump. He is very volatile in his relationships. We have seen that in Scotland before, when he was professed to be a great friend when it came to his golf courses and everything else. And then when Scotland made a decision, for example, for renewable energy turbines quite near his golf course, he was not happy at all and thought he could just tell us to stop it. But no, we make our own decisions as far as we are able. So no, I don't think anyone can rely on President Trump. We've seen that by the tariffs that have been imposed, and that's worrying. It's worrying for the Scottish food and drink industry, particularly whisky, a great export from Scotland. It's worrying for our technologies, like in renewables, and it's worrying for research and development. However, John Swinney, as First Minister of Scotland, will be meeting lots of people in the US. He'll be meeting descendants of Scotland, of which there are millions in the United States of America. He'll be meeting business leaders. And he recently actually met the son of Donald Trump, who came to Scotland and met with the First Minister about the golf courses and the leisure facilities in Scotland. So he will do what he has to do, always for the benefit of Scotland. And I'm really pleased he's leading the Tartan Day Parade, and he'll do it well.
Every time Scotland is mentioned in the same sentence with Donald Trump, I must say I remember Janie Godley. May she rest in peace.
Well,
a very
I don't
strong
think we
statement.
can repeat that.
Very strong statement that she made when it came to him. Historical statement. Like I said, yes. Rest in peace, Janie. I want to thank you, Linda, for taking time to discuss Scotland, Scotland's future, possible independence, the debate of independence, and of course, economical legs that Scotland has to stand on. So I want to thank you for that, and I'll be seeing you soon, hopefully, in Glasgow.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Bila je ovo Linda Fabiani koja mi se javila iz studija Broadcasting Scotland. Naravno, mi se približavamo kraju naše emisije. Ostanite još vrlo kratko uz nas. Naša krovna medijska kuća, američki Newsmax, privukla je globalnu pažnju nakon spektakularnog debija na njujorškoj berzi u ponedjeljak, kada je cijena njenih dionica porasla više od 700% u samo jednom danu trgovanja. Dionice su inicijalno bile ponuđene po cijeni od $10, ali su već u ranim satima trgovanja dostigle $14. Međutim, ono što je uslijedilo iznenadilo je iskusne analitičare s Wall Streeta. Cijena je nastavila vrtoglavo rasti, probijajući granice do 50 i 60 $60 da bi na kraju dana završila na nevjerovatnih $83,51, što predstavlja rast od 735%. Prema Bloombergu, ovo je bio najbolji prvi dan trgovanja neke dionice u posljednje 3 godine. Toliko u Pulsu planete. Ove ostale vijesti i razgovore koje ste možda propustili možete pronaći na našem sajtu newsmaxbalkans.com. Mi se vidimo naredne sedmice. Ostanite uz nas.